This podcast is a proud member of the Unidentified Network.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in colour, it's Mr. Wayne Lovejuice.
The other day our producer Louis had a chat with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithms really aren't that happy if a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we decided we can text ya whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book on the track extra. You hear me on this show going on about how I'm getting old and decrepit. Well, sadly, I'm not the only member of the household who can say this, because Archie can no longer do his party piece. It used to be that if I sat down with my guitar or a keyboard and played and sung a Beach Boys song, he would howl along with it. He'd sing and make big howls, because he said that he was getting in touch with his lupine heritage. Because yes, wolves once roamed these lands, and the domestic dog is a domesticated or semi-domesticated subspecies of the grey wolf, and Archie feels very proud of the fact that his family were once wolves. But because he's going deaf now, and he really is, a little bit less exuberant than he once was, he no longer sings along to Beach Boys songs, which is very sad. But I suppose it's just part of the aging process. We tried it, and he half-heartedly made some noises that sounded a bit like a cat, but he didn't do any of his howling, I'm afraid. Well, I found till that even away. And then I tried it, making whoo noises when I didn't have the backing tape on, and Archie finally gave about the best analogue of a howl that he's done in many years. And then the dear little boy has settled down, made himself comfortable, and is now happily sitting on my lap, hoping that somebody's going to bring him a biscuit. Let's talk about wolves, because everybody talks about the British big cats, but a similar, very similar British mystery animal, which isn't discussed anywhere near as much as it should be, is the reoccurrence of British wolves. Probably the most famous was killed in 1904 in Allendale in Northumberland. It was an adult grey wolf which was found cut in two by a train that had run over it. It had been one of at least two wolves which had been reported from the region for some years, and which had not only been seen but had attacked livestock and basically gone on a killing spree across Northumberland. And amusingly, in Hexham, which we'll come back to in a minute, there was a committee had been formed to deal with this lupine menace called the Hexham Wolf Committee. And when in 1971 the affair of the Hexham Heads took place, which for those of you who don't know were two artificial heads found buried in a garden in Hexham, Northumberland, which were linked with what had been called werewolf or wolfman attacks, incidents, not attacks, incidents. Many people believe that this was a reoccurrence of the Hexham wolf. The fact that it had been about 65 years since the Hexham wolf had actually been seen didn't really matter. No one knows what happened to the Hexham wolf or wolves, and indeed no one knows whatever happened to the Hexham Heads either. But we know from this rather gruesome photograph that at least one wolf was at large in the area for a time. There's another story about a wolf which was shot in Epping Forest sometime in, I believe, in and about the First World War. There is another story of a, quote, timber wolf, unquote, which was caught alive in Epping Forest round about the 1870s, and it appears in a book called Our Picture Book, which tells the story of the wildlife and lore of the forest. And here you can see the lone wolf in the engraving, symbolizing both freedom and captivity simultaneously. The story goes, in fact there's two stories. One is that a chap who had worked some of his life as a trapper in the Canadian woods came back to his native Essex and brought his pet timber wolf with him. And the other, which is possibly slightly more believable, is that the local foxhounds had been over diligent and had wiped out foxes in the forest, and so the local MFH, Master of Foxhounds, imported some foxes from Germany, some fox cubs from Germany to release in the forest, and some of those fox cubs turned out to be wolf cubs. Bizarrely, the same story, exactly the same story, also happens, and it has been reported from parts of Dartmoor. And there are very wild bits in the north of Dartmoor where folklorist Theo Brown and Bernard Heuvelmans were both convinced that there were still wolves living wild and free, whether they had been released by the Master of Foxhounds or whether they were the descendants of the indigenous British wolf that has survived for several hundred years after they were supposed to have been wiped out in an area of northern Dartmoor where hardly anybody ever goes. And in the last couple of hundred years, since Napoleonic times at least, it's only ever been used as a army training ground. And unless you're driving a tank or you're a hippie looking for magic mushrooms, because I will admit that was what took me there back in the day, and they always were very wild and free there, then you don't go there. But now we have another wolf story. Now this is actually the second one to have happened in the Forest of Dean in the last 10 or 15 years. According to this story in the Daily Mirror, which goes, wolf, blah blah blah, I don't even know if that's going to work, which goes, wolf spotted chasing deer through UK park by dog walker before fleeing into the woods. It reports how April Collier was walking her dog in the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire when she saw a herd of deer. Is it a herd of deer? I'm not sure if it is a herd of deer. I can't remember what the connective noun for deer is, being chased by what she is convinced was a wolf. She says it was a sight she'll never forget. A woman was left stunned after spotting what she believes was a wolf chasing a herd of deer in the UK. April Collier, age 43, was enjoying a weekend getaway with her partner and their dog in the Forest of Dean, Gloucestershire, when she witnessed the unexpected sight. April, from Caerphilly in South Wales, said, "We were in the Forest of Dean at Cannock Ponds in the cycle track. It was the first time I'd visited the area with my partner and my dog. I decided I was going to go on up ahead through to Verderer's Trail. When I got near the track at the top, about 10 deer were running from my left out of the woods onto the track, and in the middle of them there was a wolf." She was taken aback by the close encounter as the deer and wolf were just 2 meters away from her. She watched as the deer sprinted down the track with the wolf in pursuit. April described, "The wolf was bigger than the deer and its colours really stood out. The fur of the wolf was grey and it had dark flecks towards its lower back, and its tail was so bushy," reports Gloucestershire Live. "The deer and the wolf had run off into the bracken, and I was left there just speechless until my partner had caught up with me. By then I was more concerned with getting my dog away just in case the wolf decided to return. It was a sight I will never forget. When I'd seen the wolf, it was in 2021, and I've read of a few sightings since on tracker websites. I would really like to hear if anyone else has seen a wolf in the Forest of Dean lately, as the documented sightings have not been recorded much recently." April reached out to wildlife aficionado Frank Tunbridge. Frank, age 76, of Podsmead, Gloucester, champions the enlightening experiences that await in the Forest of Dean for those who venture through its woods. Tunbridge explains that witnessing the area's diverse fauna can be truly captivating, from birds to deer or even the elusive wild boar. "Many people will discount her report," he says, implying it was probably a husky or maybe a wolf dog. "However, over the years I've received quite a few similar reports from the Forest of Dean area, and in every case they were identified as displaying all the features and behaviour of a wolf," he said. "Wolves are very efficient predators, secretive and great wanderers, who can scent a human on the wind from over a mile away and so are not often seen. When one crosses your path, it's a sight that you will remember forever, similar to encountering a British big cat or a lynx, which also exists in Gloucestershire and throughout the UK. Many exotic species have now established themselves throughout wild places across the UK after being dumped and released when the 1976 Dangerous Wild Animals Act came into force." Yes, well, I think it's now well over 40 years. In fact, it's very nearly 50 years since the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. I think we can probably start ceasing the blame for every out-of-place animal on the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. However, the wolf sightings do appear to be real. And so, wherever they came from, these stories, I think, are very interesting and something that we should look at further. It is claimed that now we are the only country in Western Europe that doesn't have wolves. But what if that claim is completely untrue? What if they were here all along? See you next time.